Welcome, everyone. Good to see a lot of you here. I'm Kev, and this is the last show of my Edinburgh Fringe this year. 7 shows doing this show in person up in Edinburgh a week or so ago, and then 5 shows virtual, including this one. Let us begin. When I was 10, 11 years old, 2 books I found in the school library that totally changed my life. The first book, well, that's the subject of next year's show. But the other book, well, it's all of this ancient Egyptian mythology. It was obviously a children's book, storybook, telling us lots of the various classic literature from ancient Egypt. Well, it blew my mind. I just had to have more and more. And so my life, decades later, is still fulfilling that dream. So I'm going to go through a couple of, some stories. We'll see how we go. Normally this show is about an hour and a half if it was in person, but not at the Fringe. The Fringe is only an hour. So we're limited. But I will tell you the first story, and it was definitely from that book. One of my most absolute favorite stories, mainly because it covers so many of the storytelling tropes used now. And, you know, this story was written in New Kingdom, 1600, 1300 BC, around those times. It is just fantastic. It is called The Doomed Prince. Egypt was prosperous. There were no invaders. The land was bountiful. The people happy and contented. Everything was perfect in Egypt, except for one thing. There was no successor to the throne. Now, Pharaoh and his queen loved one another dearly. And even though the Pharaoh's vizier was whispering in his ear to find another wife, because, it's always the wife's fault, isn't it? He refused. They loved each other so much, they were going to work this through. But as the years went by, still no successor. People began to whisper. No successor means civil war. As a compromise, the king and his queen decided to tour Egypt, to visit every shrine and temple and petition every deity that they could find in the hope that one of them will grant them a child. Well, they sailed the length of Egypt, visited every shrine and temple, and the process and journey took months. Now, being so close together for that time, the inevitable actually did happen, and the queen was pregnant. Now, when a child is born in Egypt, the 7 Hathors come and dictate the ultimate doom upon that child, how the child will die. Now, for us mere mortals, such knowledge can only be divined by including a priest to work that out for us. But this was the child of the living God. It was also a child blessed by the gods. Therefore, when the 7 Hathors dictated the doom upon this child, the whole country heard. This boy, this prince of Egypt, shall die by either a snake, a dog, or a crocodile. Naturally, Pharaoh and his queen were concerned. They were also more concerned with the fact that this could be their only chance of a child. Therefore, it would be best and very prudent to move the child away from any potential harm. They moved him far inland, outside a small village, with a house filled with reliable and dependable staff. They would watch his every single move and ensure none of those threats encroached upon him. Well, unfortunately, our little prince, as all small children alike, get bored. He had no other children his age to play with, just all these elderly people around him watching his every move. When he took advantage of that, he played, he tormented them, he would hide, he would climb, and just be, as any small child, just a real pain. Well, the staff loved him. They adored their prince. Not more so than the prince's tutor. Every night, as the sun goes down, the prince and his tutor would sit upon the roof of the house where it was cooler and talk about the day and what they've learned and what they've seen and what they've thought. And it was a pleasant way to end the day. Well, on one particular day, while the prince was around 8 or 9, they were sitting upon the roof, and the prince happened to look down onto the dirt track outside the house that led to the nearby village. He spotted a boy about his own age, and there was an animal dancing around the boy. The tutor followed the gaze of his prince, and he dreaded the words that were to come out of the prince's mouth. "What is that?" he asked. "That, my prince, is a dog." The tutor was very concerned about what might come out of his prince's mouth next, and he dreaded the possibility. "I want one." Well, the tutor loved his prince, but he was well aware of the doom that lay upon this boy. He knew if he asked his father, the pharaoh, if he could obtain a dog for the prince, his father would refuse. But the tutor reckoned that, with so many people around the boy all the time, should this dog, if he was to get one, prove a problem, he would be able to intervene. So the tutor obtained a dog, a greyhound, much like the one the prince saw. Well, needless to say, the prince was ecstatic. He had never had so much fun in his life. The boy and his dog were inseparable. They adored one another. They were never apart. But the staff watched carefully. Well, the years go by. The boy becomes a man. And the prince, knowing full well his duties as next in line to the throne, was eager to return to the palace, to see and be involved in the running of the country. But the pharaoh refused. Now is not the time. The house the prince had never left before in his entire life, as a young adult, was tiny. He needed to get out. He wanted to see his country. So under the cover of darkness, the prince takes matters into his own hands. One night, when the house is quiet, the prince and his dog creep to the stable. They attach one of the royal chariots to a horse, throw open the barn doors, and head into the night, into a world the prince had never been before. At this point, he had no interest in what direction he had to get away in case he was spotted. And he pushed the chariot hard into the desert. Now, in his flight, he realized there are going to be some problems with this. For one, he is richly dressed. He is also in a royal chariot. He needs a story, because if someone catches him, the game will be over quickly. It took a while, the still of the night. He came up with a story. This will have to do for the moment, but this could work. What if I was to say, my father is in the royal charioteers? That would account for the chariot. But he's taken a new wife, and my stepmother doesn't like me. She is nasty and vindictive. And I decided I actually want to run away and seek my own fortune. That is reasonable, certainly plausible. We will go with that until another opportunity comes along. Well, they head out into the night. The days go by. The prince is well aware that they will know he's missing and they'll be looking for him. He had to stay away from any village where people could spot someone of such wealth suddenly appearing from nowhere. Luckily, he is well trained in archery. His dog also accompanies him. So they were able to hunt, scavenge, and occasionally, under the cover of dark, steal from various small towns and villages that they could find. Our prince began to consider what to do with this new freedom. Well, this was also a very good opportunity, being incognito, to see his country from a different perspective. In fact, what would be very useful, as pharaoh, international relationships are crucial to the safety of the country. Visiting some of our neighbours and observing them would be extremely valuable at this point. And so he heads northwest. Those to the west of Egypt were powerful and they were rich. They were a threat, and they are a continued threat to Egypt. Well, it is a long way. Entering the territory, he does notice differences from Egypt. The towns and the villages are different. People speak different. Everything is different. He soon joins a busy trading route heading deeper in. Exotic items flowing in and out attract his attention and draw him to a major city he sees for quite some distance ahead. Heading towards it, he follows the traffic, the trading traffic into the city. They all appear to be heading to the central marketplace, a good place to do some investigation. He parks up his chariot and bids his dog to stay while he goes off on foot to explore the wonders of this city and its incredible sights, sounds, smells, overwhelming. He'd been in the desert for months. This was just such an incredible experience. But something was troubling at the back of his mind. And then he realized every so often he would hear cheering in the from one part of the market. Odd. He began to explore and follow the noise. It led to the far corner, and on entering a wide open space, there were crowds gathered around a really tall tower with a single window at the top. Curious, our prince observed the surroundings. He then found what the cheers were about. There were a group of, well, quite obviously nobles, for they were richly dressed compared to all the others in there. And one would break away from the crowd, from the group, and start to climb the wall of this tower. Would get about halfway, overreach, and then plummet to the ground. And when he hits the ground, evidently dead because he does not move, the crowd just goes wild and cheering. Very odd, the prince thought. He elbows a nearby observer and just, what is this? He's explained that this is the city of Nazareth. The prince of the city has a beautiful daughter, and he was forever being pestered for her hand in marriage, so much so that he could not focus on running the city. So he devised an idea, was that to put her in the high tower, and anyone who climbs the tower can marry her. It was a cunning plan because no one's actually achieved it yet, and now the prince has so much time he can actually do what he needs to do for the city. And so, continuous line of idiots try the climb. Our prince is impressed with such thinking and observed the next idiot to have a go. Again, he climbs halfway up, overreaches, and falls, much to the crowd's enjoyment. Well, the prince watches yet another attempt, and again he hits the same spot and falls. But our prince observes the mistake they are always making. His childhood of climbing around the house has paid him well for this, for he sees the right handhold to go for. He follows the brickwork further up, and up and up and up. Now, it could be that at this point, the princess in the tower is looking down upon the crowds that gather. But from our prince's point of view, when he gazes up at that window, their eyes for him meet, and it is love at first sight. The prince is determined to try. He steps forward. The nobles turn to see who else is now approaching, and our prince has sort of forgotten something really basic here. He's been out in the wilderness for months. His once beautiful clothing is dusty, torn, and unkempt. They turn their noses up at him. Why a peasant should be trying this. But when our prince straightens his back, his smile widens. The nobles calmed down. They sensed something unusual, something amazing about this man. And they step aside to let him try. Of course, he'll be dead in the next couple of minutes, so it doesn't really matter, does it? So our prince begins the climb. The crowds are silent. They are waiting for that single same spot. Well, our prince reaches it. There's a hush. They are waiting. He takes a different direction. There's whispers. Different. He has gone above the point where everybody fails. The prince climbs further. He's climbing further. His hand reaches the sill of the window. The crowd goes loopy. No, this is just incredible. No one has done this before. And our prince gets through the window. Now, the guards that were waiting outside the tower, guarding the princess, never really ever expected anybody to do this. So when the crowd went mad and they burst into the room to see what was going on, they spotted this disheveled kind of creature by the window, and the princess was going to him. Well, the guards were quite adamant that this is not the kind of man suitable for her hand. And they rush him to push him back through the window. But the princess stands between our prince and the guards. If he goes through this window, so shall I. Well, that's well beyond the pay grade for these guards. They had to summon her father. He's pretty much of the same mind, to be honest. But again, our prince, standing noble, with a smile that is very disarming. Her father softens. He considers, well, a wedding will take some time to arrange. With a bit of water, some nice clothes. He might brush up while and be suitable. If not, we can always push him through the window later anyway. Well, our prince suddenly rushed into a wedding of a noble birth. He had to still stick to this chariot story. He was surprised that they actually bought the story, to be honest. It seemed to be quite convincing enough that they accepted it without a problem. He obviously didn't mention about these dooms either, because that would put a dampener on a few things, to be honest. Hopefully, someday it'll all work out. Well, they were married. And they resided in the palace there. With some subtle questioning, the prince was able to ascertain that the river that flowed near the palace was free of crocodiles. That was subtle. He didn't want to alarm anybody. So most mornings he took to walking his dog. And the princess wasn't particularly happy that this mangy greyhound thing was always by his side, but he was adamant that, this was a childhood friend and loyal. And she put up with it. Well, the weeks went by and they were happy. And everything was normal and safe. Until one night. The prince had gone to bed, and his princess was sat at her table, preparing her hair. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted movement on the floor. It was a snake. It was heading for the bed. Without thinking, she grabbed her hairpin and leapt at the snake, stabbing it repeatedly until it was dead. Obviously, such noise woke the prince and his dog. The prince looked at the snake, concerned. That was evidently coming for him. Perhaps it was good time to reveal maybe this doom thing. So he explains to his wife, there are 3 dooms upon him. The snake, which has now been resolved, the dog, and the crocodile. Now, obviously, his princess looked at the dog, and the prince had to reassure her, no, my dog is loyal to me. We've been together since childhood. I will bet my life on this dog. Princess wasn't born that, and she was going to be watching carefully. Well, everything settled back down again, and all was well in the world. As I said, the prince and his dog would often go for a walk along the river. The greyhound obviously requires a lot of exercise, and so the prince would travel for a good couple of miles along the riverbank. Well, one morning, his greyhound had shot round the bend of the river, and the prince was then startled when a huge flock of birds suddenly leapt into the sky. While wondering what that was, the prince noticed his dog had come back round the corner and was heading straight for him. The dog looked wild, its eyes wide open, foaming mouth, teeth open. He was focused directly at the prince. The prince panicked. Had his dog turned on him? What to do? He was too far from the palace to run. He could not outrun the greyhound, but he had to try. He turned and ran as fast as he could. He could feel the dog getting closer. It was getting closer. There was no option. The dog was either going to attack him or he had to do something. The only option he had was to jump into the river. It was going to be risky, but it would slow the dog down. So the prince leaps, splashes into the water, and then he realizes that was actually probably a fatal mistake. For his dog was not actually coming to attack him. It was coming to warn him. The crocodile had disrupted the birds, and there was a crocodile in the river heading round the bend. It had seen the prince in the water. Now, the prince knew he could definitely not outswim the crocodile in the river. But he had to try and get back to the bank. He swam as hard as he could. He knew this would be close. But then there was a large splash beside him. He turns his head. He sees his dog had jumped into the water and was heading to intercept the crocodile. But the prince reaches the bank, turns and watches as they both engage. The water churns. There is foam and thrashing. And then the foam turns red. And then all is quiet. The prince waits, eager to see what has become of his dog. The body of the crocodile floats to the surface, still and unmoving. The crocodile is dead. That's another of the dooms gone. But then so did the body of his dog float to the surface, still and unmoving. The prince is in grief. His childhood friend is dead, saving him. He wades into the water, lifts out the dog, and takes his friend home, back to the palace. Now, in his grief, he is oblivious to the appearance that he now has. He is soaking wet. He is carrying a dead dog, and he is covered in the blood of his dead dog and the crocodile. Not surprisingly, the palace goes completely loopy, and all panic ensues. Well, the prince realizes, even with now his dog is dead, which he thought was coming to kill him, that is another of the dooms, or 3 dooms of Gom. Perhaps he has now cheated the gods. Perhaps it is now the time to return home. He breaks the news to his wife of these 3 dooms are now gone, and that actually not the son of a charioteer. He is actually Crown Prince of Egypt. Now, her father, on hearing this news, is not surprisingly really happy to be father-in-law to the next pharaoh. That is an elevation of incredible wealth and power. Of course, the prince and his daughter can return to Egypt. He will have full military escort. He'll have the whole army if he has to. Well, our prince returns home. His parents are obviously really pleased to see him. And on hearing of the dooms have now been defeated and our prince has defeated the gods, his father decides such a special person deserves the throne. So he steps aside and allows his son, our prince, and his princess to become king and queen of Egypt. And they live happily ever after. Thank you. So love that story. It is such a good story. Right, we're gonna go a bit dark for this one. I don't know. Well, through lockdown, when I sort of started writing some of these, I caught the TV series called Tales of the Unexpected, based on the Roald Dahl's books. They were a TV series in the UK for, I think they had about 7 or 8 series. They went on for a long time in the late 70s, early 80s. But I love the imagery and the slight storytelling that they give. All the twists and turns you can pack into about half an hour. So I decided to do some Tales of the Unexpected, but based in ancient Egypt. I think I wrote about 5 or 6 scripts, but this one is my favorite because it's actually based on a real story, on real events, no less. Early part of the last century, a papyrus was found in a rubbish heap. It had been carefully cut up and disposed of. They were obviously trying to destroy this document. Why they didn't burn it, don't know. That would have been more efficient. But what it documented was an assassination or an assassination attempt on a pharaoh, on Ramesses III. Now, Ramesses III mummy does show evidence of a really badly severed neck. And there are various debates that it was either a bad mummification process, or he died in battle, or he was actually assassinated. The document describes the trial, which is a very vague trial. It's just it is not a trial. And it's not particularly clear whether he was actually alive or it was done in his name. Now, I ran my particular version past one of the top Egyptologists for this area, Dodson. And he said, well, we've got a couple of really good possibilities, but, this one is as good as any other option. And I'll take that as a good validation of this story. So this is my dramatization of what we now call the harem conspiracy, with a twist. Pharaoh must die. Second royal wife, Tia, leans back in her chair and observes the man before her, sat in her bedchamber in the cover of darkness. It is Pebenham, chief of the harem, and what she had just said was treason. At any moment, her, and possibly him, could be dragged away and executed. She eagerly waits for his response, hoping she hasn't miscalculated. He looks towards the door, turns back. "Tell me more," he says. She is relieved. Egypt is in a bad place. Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great, brought great wealth, power, expansion, and notoriety. Incredible things to this country. But his son struggles. We have invasion to the north. The sea people are on the borders. We have famine. We have revolt by workers. First recorded strike in history. This is a pale comparison to his father. The dynasty must end. His son, with the great first wife of Tai, will only continue the descent into disaster. The dynasty must end. I suggest, Pebenham, that my son replace Pharaoh, and I, as regent, will guide Egypt back to its glory. What I want you to do is find those that are sympathetic to my cause and bring them round, ready for when we strike. Pebenham considers. What do you want me to do, Your Highness? She reaches into a bag that's on her lap and withdraws a wax doll. Pebenham's eyes widen. He looks at her. You propose witchcraft against Pharaoh. It is bad enough treason to seek the death of Pharaoh, but to use witchcraft against the king, that is an abomination. If we are discovered, there will be no afterlife for us. There will be oblivion. We will cease to be. This is dangerous, but I will do this, for I agree. What do you need me to do? Holding the doll, she watches Pebenham closely. I smuggled an old woman from one of the villages into the palace. She taught me how to use these wax dolls to bind the will of our enemies and to paralyze them so they will not be able to react. They will not be able to do anything when we strike. They will be incapacitated. I want you to take this bag of dolls, spread them around the palace, find targets close to Pharaoh, the guards, officials, anyone who could be against us. And when the time is ready, they will be immovable, and we can strike. You can have to do this, Pebenham. I, as royal wife, I am watched constantly for my own protection. But you have full access to the whole palace. No one will stop you. No one will watch you. You have to be my mouth. Well, Pebenham takes the dolls. And over the coming weeks, he spreads around the palace, whispering in ears, seeking those that are loyal to Tia's plans. It's not hard to find those against the king. Tia is not a very pleasant queen. One night, on the other side of the palace, in the bedchamber of the first royal wife of Ramesses III, Queen Tia, she paces her bedchamber. She has felt off for a few days now. Something is not right in the palace. She pauses. She looks to the side, a chest that is against the wall of her chamber, and runs over to it, throws the lid open, and lifts out a wax doll from the box. Its head is badly damaged. She looks at it. And so it begins. She places the doll back in and closes the lid. She summons the guards, and with a group before her. You men are loyal to your king, they nod enthusiastically. Beware, there is evil in the palace. I fear for the life of Pharaoh. Be on your guard. She's not wrong, because the other side of the palace, back in Queen Tia's bedchamber, her and Pebenham sit. They'd been there all day planning their next move. And as night time falls, they decide it is now time to strike. Well, actually, Tia tells Pebenham it's time to strike. It certainly feels that way for Pebenham's point of view. He's then a little bit concerned and really surprised when Tia turns her head and starts to talk to the shadows. There's no one else in the room. She then waves towards the door, and shadows move against the wall. Pebenham is petrified. He is certain no one else has been in that room all the time he was been there. Tia looks at his shocked and terrified face. Yes, Pebenham. That's my assassin. He's good, isn't he? Well, they wait in silence. It feels like hours. They strain their ears for the slightest sound from the quiet palace. And then they hear something. Shouting, clashing of metal on metal and of stone, and running. The running seems quite close, actually. Pebenham is unsettled. He heads straight for the door. Tia stands and slowly walks over. Into the corridor they stand, waiting to see which direction the noises are coming from, and then they spot it. There's a man running heading straight for them with a load of guards close behind, trying to apprehend him. Tia is not impressed. Through gritted teeth, Pebenham, if he is caught, we are undone. Do something. Pebenham extracts a dagger from his sleeve, and hiding it to his side, he approaches the man hurtling towards him. As he gets close, he holds him, stabs him. The man doesn't even see the knife hit him full in the chest. He is dead instantly, and they fall to the ground. The guards all surround them, now completely confused as to what to do. Their quarry has been killed. But the crowd parts, and in between stands first royal wife of Ramesses III. Queen T looks down at the dead body, Pebenham holding the bloodied knife, and Tia, her opposition, by the door, glaring. Arrest these two, Pebenham and Tia, for treason. Well, to say there was a trial for an attempted assassination of Pharaoh is an understatement, really, because it wasn't really a trial. With the two instigators captured, everybody else just falls over and just admits their involvement, which was a shame because they've committed an abomination. There will be no afterlife for any of them. And in fact, for the next week or so, the trial just consists of mass burning of people alive at the stake. There will be no bodies. They will have no afterlife. They will be erased from history. And so, with the final two, Pebenham and Tia, kneeling before Pharaoh, Pharaoh enacts the final judgments. Well, Pebenham will receive the same fate as all of the others. He pleads for his life. He blames Tia's corruption. There will be no mercy, and he is dragged screaming to a stake to be burned alive. Tia, on the other hand, is different. Pharaoh is deeply upset at the betrayal, but she is a royal wife to Pharaoh. She will have an option. She will obviously be burnt at the stake. She will be denied afterlife. But she can take poison to bypass the pain of the burning. She willingly accepts that option. But also for her child too. There shall be no threat to the throne. Queen Tai steps from the throne. She carries a vial of poison. She offers it to Tia, who's had her child brought to her so that she could administer the first drops. Tia is terrified, but she refuses to give the Pharaoh benefit of her terror. She shakes her head at the offer to poison her child first. She knows her hands would shake. So T kneels down beside the pair of them and puts a couple of drops into the child's mouth. The child doesn't take long. And then it is Tia's turn. Again, she refuses to do this herself. She is terrified beyond comprehension. Everything is going to end. So T leans in close and begins to pour the poison to Tia's open mouth. And with her mouth, T's mouth close to Tia's ear, she whispers, Thank you for the diversion. It was I, disguised as the old woman, who taught you the magic of those dolls. No one will suspect me later when I kill the pharaoh in his sleep. My son shall have the throne years ahead of his time, and I shall be regent. Tia's eyes widen at the sudden realization she'd been played, but those eyes do not close again, for she is dead. Queen T stands and looks down upon the two dead bodies before her. She looks at the royal court around her. Pharaoh's justice has been served. Long live Pharaoh. And in a whisper, until tonight. Thank you. I like that one. So this is my final show of the PBH Free Fringe. 7 days of in-person shows and 5 days of virtual. Now, if this was in person, I would now be saying that I have the venue for free, so I can present such shows for you for free. And, you know, technically this is free for me to do as well, because I'm at home doing this, and it's free for you to come in too. If you want to give any kind of donation because you feel value for this show, then that I would love. It would help me share more, but it does not matter. If you do not want to donate, not a problem, but I will finish with a couple of more things. Now, all of the normal stories of literature tend to be for the elite people. For us mere mortals out in the villages, we have other entertainment, traveling musicians, singers, and so on. Now, there's a really boring piece of text. Well, archaeologists, Egyptologists call some of their collections really quite dull names, to be honest. And this is the Harris Papyrus. It's more well known as the Songs of the Harper. It is a beautiful selection of love poetry, often quite explicit and sometimes really quite weird at times. But there's two that I absolutely adore, and they're the cleaner ones, so I'm going to do those. Now, the first is beautiful. Now, again, these are New Kingdom. So this is very important. 1600, 1300 BC. The translation may be modern, but the interpretation is contemporary, and it is good stuff. If you do not embrace me, who will you go to? If you are not with me, where will you actually go? There are no opportunities elsewhere. But if you stroke my thighs and breasts, you will be most satisfied. If you are hungry, are you a man thinking only of his stomach? Would you walk away from me more concerned with your stylish clothes, leaving me with rags? Remember this: one day with me in your arms are better than 100,000 anywhere else on earth. That I like. Very powerful. Now, this last one, that'll end the show on. It touched me so much, I created a whole perfume range based on this. I'm also a perfumer as well as a performer. Hey. And it is stunning. Well, for me anyway. Oh my God, my lover. It is pleasant when you come to watch me bathe at the canal while I'm dressed in royal linen, wet and clinging. See, I'll enter the water and bring out a fish, happy in my hands just for you. So come, my lover, come and look me over. My love, she is on yonder bank of the river. Crocodiles wait for me, but my heart is strong. I will step upon the waves, and they will be like land to my feet. Her arms open wide. We embrace. I am like a man in paradise, like I'm overwhelmed with drugs. Her lips part. We kiss, and I am drunk without beer. Thank you, and good night.